Welcome to another episode of the People and AI podcast, where we explore the world of artificial intelligence, its impact on society, and the incredible people driving innovation in this space. And there's no one more qualified to fit all of those bills than our guest today and a very dear friend of mine, Salim Teja. He's a partner at Radical Ventures today. Salim leads the firm's Velocity team and brings over 20 years of experience as an investor, operator, and innovator in the Canadian and broader technology ecosystem. Salim, you've started companies, you're now investing in companies. So I'm really, really happy to have you on and kind of get all the details of what you're looking at and what the world of AI has to bring. So welcome, Salim.
Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe Salim, we quickly start with getting a background to yourself. You've done so many things. You've had such a rich career. Do you want to walk us through sort of your journey from sort of day one and all of these different hats that you've worn and how you are now and how and what you're doing now as a partner at Radical?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I've sort of had a 30-year career in the tech sector, getting old and feeling old. Started my first third of my career being an entrepreneur myself out in the Bay Area, starting and building my own venture in the e-commerce space with two great co-founders. And to me, that was just an incredible time. This was the late 90s, early 2000s when the web was just taking off and e-commerce was a massive theme. And it was just an incredible opportunity at such a young phase in my career to learn what it meant to be a founder, to experience the whole process of company building, raising capital, growing a team, scaling a team, navigating the market gyrations. And for me, that was just an incredible opportunity to experience and live what it was like to be a founder. The next third of my career, I came back to Canada then and got to spend time being on the other side of the table, being an investor with a firm called Brightspark Ventures, where we are investing in early stage software and internet deals. And so that was then a unique opportunity to source new deals, work with founders, build companies, raise capital, and learn all of the things that would hopefully help me be a better investor, and also leveraging all of my operating experience to be a better investor as well. And so that was, an incredible learning experience for me. And then prior to joining Radical, I spent many years at Mars Discovery District being an ecosystem builder here in Toronto, where we're standing up one of the world's largest innovation centers, raised about $700 million to build a 1.5 million square foot facility to really put Canada on the map in a really big way and to grow the startup ecosystem. And so there got a lot of experience building physical community, got a lot of experience, building programs to help support startups and scale-ups across a number of different sectors. Worked very closely with government to build economic development policy, immigration policy in order to grow the economy really driven by science and technology. And so that was a really interesting and meaningful journey, really helping build a very different set of muscles that were important.
And that definitely left a mark in the Canadian ecosystem. I don't think I've ever encountered anyone who doesn't know you as a result of all of that work that you've done. So
Thank you. It's certainly the product of a lot of hard work from an incredible team and an important mission and mandate that the organization had. And then as we were doing that work, we started to sort of see the world of AI start to develop. And in 2019, I left Mars to help start Radical Ventures, to join the team here with a real goal to, building a platform to really fund the next generation of entrepreneurs that we felt was going to come out of this new and emerging ecosystem And we felt like we didn't see a specialized AI fund anywhere in the world that had technical depth, had access to all of the luminaries that were, pioneering the field, and a firm built by people who had built companies and scaled companies and understood what the journey was through navigating, finding product market fit. And so 2019, we started Radical Ventures. And fast forward now 5 years, we've raised about $1 billion in capital across 3 funds with offices in Toronto, Palo Alto, and London. Since 2019, our team has looked at probably well over 8,000 AI startups. We've invested in about 47 companies to date. And we certainly see lots of opportunities in 2 areas. The first is investing in the startups and the technologies that are going to build the technical infrastructure that is going to unlock the enterprise adoption of AI. And so there we are investing actively in compute innovation, data innovation, foundation model innovation, tooling innovation, as we sort of see this next generation of compute stack emerge. And then the other side is more applied AI, where we are looking at sectors like healthcare, financial services, commerce, climate, where we see entrepreneurs really using ML at the heart of their product strategy in order to unlock new capability that perhaps wasn't possible before the rise of AI and machine learning. And so we're seeing some incredible companies and founders building really great businesses there. And our hope ultimately is to build a platform here where we can, not only fund early stage companies, but also growth stage companies, all focused on the, enterprise transformation through AI. And so that's sort of the platform that.
Amazing. And I think you are invested in some of the hottest AI startups across the board, right? I mean, from Cohere to Hebia, and I believe you've also backed Dr. Fei-Fei Li's latest startup. And there's so many other interesting ones that I even failed to mention here. But as you think about, from a Radical Venture standpoint, what's the hypothesis or what's the thesis that you have when you pick a company that fits those criteria, right? What do you look for? I guess let's start there. What do you look for, and what makes a company interesting to you?
Yeah, I think first of all, it all starts with people. And so what we want to find are sort of world-class experts in this new field where there is both technical depth and business depth in terms of the opportunity that we are looking for. We are looking for companies that have very strong technical foundations where we can build technology moats and data moats that help protect an opportunity. And so we really want to fund world-class machine learning teams that are supplemented with very, very strong software engineering teams and very strong product teams. And then we want to fund, those companies that can take that incredible research and technology understanding and apply it to a problem set with a product vision that we think is very compelling and meaningful and that can unlock value in lots of different ways. And so I think that it starts for us with understanding technology strength, product strength, what problem are we solving in the market and how large is that opportunity? And then how do we understand the headwinds and tailwinds that a company is going to have to navigate as they try and unlock that massive opportunity? And do we think that they can do that at venture scale? And so, for any deal that we look at, it always comes down to why this opportunity, why this team, and why now? And I think if we can feel comfortable about all of those elements, I think we get really excited about, the opportunity that we're seeing.
Amazing. Do you mind if we double click on that, right? So give me an example of an investment that you made that you thought, certainly team, right? I think that's undeniable. The team brings their expertise. I think a composition of the team needs to bring their expertise from a technical standpoint, from a go-to-market standpoint. I think that's great. But so can you give an example of a company that another investor may not have normally invested in, but you, Radical, took a shot at it, and then now they're at a spot where they're truly kind of making it happen?
Yeah, I mean, one example is Cohere, which is sort of one of the top players in the LLM space. I think when we looked at the market opportunity in terms of what we felt was this incredible innovation coming out of, the invention of the transformer architecture and this concept of having large language models, we really felt like all of the big tech companies were going to build very general purpose models that were going to have consumer applications and all sorts of different applications. But we felt that an LLM that was focused on the enterprise and the business and addressing the needs of the business was going to be a very differentiated opportunity. An enterprise has very different needs than a computer user of LLM. They want to build their application. They want to safeguard their data. They want to be able to launch different use cases. They want to do that across multiple clouds and not have their LLMs stuck within one particular cloud. They want to have an approach towards cybersecurity and data security. And so we really felt like as we started to see this whole universe of LLMs take off and, particularly being applied to the enterprise, that having a specialist in the field that was purely focused on helping companies innovate and adopt this technology in a pretty meaningful way was going to be an important approach to the market. And so unlike the Googles and the OpenAIs that are trying to innovate in multiple different vectors, doing a lot of different things, we felt being laser focused on the enterprise would create a lot of value. And so that was the early value proposition around Cohere. And we had an incredible founding team, incredible technologists. And I think that we were early in that hypothesis. I think people were still new to understanding what LLMs were, the impact that they would have, why and how enterprises would be curious about it. And because we were able to have our bet early, because we were able to build momentum, I think we find ourselves in a place where the company's at the right spot at the right time, where enterprises are starting to experiment. So that's one example of us trying to, foresee a market before it becomes mainstream and trying to invest ahead of the curve. And then it's up to the company to be able to execute and navigate and scale. But, with a sound foundation from a technology, product, and team perspective, we felt like they had all the elements to be one of the major players in the space. And I think we've seen that in a number of different markets that we've invested in. We try and be 3, 4, 5 years ahead of where the mainstream market is paying attention. And if we're doing that right, I think we're picking the right companies and the right opportunities in the space.
That's incredible. And of course, the lens that you've created and through which you look at companies and the opportunities, I think obviously it's proven out. It's not just, you were in Cohere before LLMs were even a thing. And I think that's a testament to how effectively that's working. So maybe let's shift gears a little bit, right? So when it comes to people, maybe your insights would be very helpful here. When you look at talent, which is necessary, that's to create sort of AI first products. What do you look for in that talent, and where do you think that talent is, or where do they exist today? Of course, the Valley usually takes most of the attention, right, for companies coming out. But there are different pools in different places. So what's your experience been in terms of where these companies exist, or where the talent exists rather, and that you would be willing to back?
Yeah, I would say that in the first 5 years of our fund, we've largely been funding companies that are essentially inventing the field of AI. So for us, in those kinds of companies, research talent and technical talent is really, really critical. So we really are looking at people who are pioneering the field, have done and published a lot of research in a particular area, maybe have had some incredible experiences within an industrial lab at Google or Microsoft or OpenAI, and understand a market opportunity really, really well. And we feel like that technical depth for those kinds of companies, it's really important to have that depth, that reputation, and an ability then to attract talent in order to continue to do that invention of AI, which is really, really critical. So for those kinds of companies, we really start with understanding the technical pedigree, the technical depth. We then want to see that coupled with very, very strong product strength as you start to build the bridge from research to commercialization, and wanting to see these founding teams be able to articulate a product vision that's solving a problem in the market. And so that strength is really important. And then we want to see some go-to-market chops, some hustle, some ability to find design partners, to some ability to get feedback from the market, and have the company kind of accelerate its market learning quickly. And that go-to-market skill set is very, very important. So that's for companies that are inventing AI. Now, not every company in the field is going to be like that. There are going to be lots of applied AI companies that are taking existing infrastructure, existing foundation models and tools, and applying it to a particular sector. And so in those scenarios, I think we look to really understand their knowledge of a particular space, how it's applied to a product vision, and looking for even faster market momentum as they're growing through their growth journey.
So there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of weeks, right, with the real concern around the amount of investment that has gone into the world of AI. There seems to be a level of frothiness and sort of heady times when it comes to anything moving with regards to AI. That's from an investment standpoint. That's number one. But juxtapose that with the lack of revenue realization in this technology or this capability that's commensurate, and how much is it going to take? Like, there's a few moving parts, right? Revenue has not showed up, and this came in the I think the Cohere article or blog that they put out. Goldman Sachs has called out that generative AI hasn't really seen the level of adoption that should be there given the interest and hype. And then we've got the other big issue that a lot of the investments dollars are really going into compute and infrastructure versus the actual application development. So the cost of building a model or an application is really, really high. So how do you think about that? First of all, do you agree? What are your thoughts on this? And let's start there.
So I will emphasize, and I'm sure you will remember, that ChatGPT launched in November, December of 2022. We are only a year and a half into this journey. And if you think of that being the iPhone moment, when executives woke up to the reality of AI and the opportunity to play with the technology and to imagine different use cases and value propositions, we're only in the early stages. So I would argue that, there is no doubt there is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of energy. There is a lot of infrastructure to be built out in order to drive the adoption of AI. But we're still early in identifying the use cases and building the ROI and helping enterprises navigate what this new technology is going to mean for them. And so I would just put that timing back into context. To expect that a year later we're going to be in $100 or $200 billion of application revenue doesn't seem logical to me, right? That do we need to grow into that, and do we need to find companies that ultimately will build sustainable recurring revenue? Yes, but think of the impatience that it seems like we have right now. We have to, and we know this. We need to, in order to unlock the enterprise adoption of AI. We need to build infrastructure so that the capability can exist to drive innovation and to drive operations. We need to be able to do it in a cost-effective way for enterprises with taking into account their concerns about cybersecurity and risk and compliance and integration into their other existing digital infrastructure. We have to allow some time for enterprises to experiment with different use cases, whether those are front-facing use cases, engaging with customers, or back office use cases, really driving operational efficiency. We're still early in that process. We haven't yet seen, we're just starting to see the emergence of
the startup ecosystem around applied AI and as it relates to applications. And so those companies are still early in their infancy. So I just feel like if you take a step back, there is no doubt that we're in a market that is overly excited. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that we're following the Gartner hype cycle where everyone's excited. We throw a lot of capital in. There's a lot of really, really high expectations of what this technology will do. We then realize that this stuff is a lot harder, and it will take more time and often will be a little bit more expensive than we thought. There will be a period of building, and coming out of that, there will be this massive wave of reinvention that will have the economics to really make the market succeed. And so, like any other new platform technology, I think we're experiencing that cycle. And so, as an investor, I think it's really important to not get caught up in the hype, stay super disciplined on the companies, the technologies where there are real moats, real value propositions that can be monetized, and not get caught up in the hype. I think that as an investor, we have to understand who are the companies in the industries that are going to be fast adopters and which are the industries that are going to be a little bit more complex, and how do we manage the timing of company building through this journey. And then third is really making sure that the bets that we make can get to venture scale within the 5 to 10 year time frame that we need in order to drive returns. And so choosing wisely around all of those vectors is important as an investor. And it's often why generalist investors get confused in these kinds of markets when they're throwing money at anything that has AI attached to it and aren't necessarily understanding the dynamics that are in play.
Well said. I think that's quite articulate. Yeah, exactly right. When has a new capability within a year and a half generated outsized revenue? Never is the answer. And I remember going through that, with Element AI like 7-8 years ago. When the first wave of AI companies, we had the same issue, right? Like the expectations and the excitement around the capability was there even then. But of course, it takes a long time to educate the industry even as to where they need to go. But going down to the question of where the cost is going, what are your thoughts around, if we have one market player really that's seeing the benefit of all those dollars flowing through, which is Nvidia, right? And then the hyperscalers, right? The cloud infrastructure companies who are providing the premises for this activity to happen. It seems like there seems to be a market that's been cornered a little bit with just a few players. Do you see that changing? Is there going to be a viable competitor to Nvidia? Are there going to be more cloud players that are going to come out that are specifically driven by the need for AI compute?
Listen, I think that the current incumbents, the big players, are going to have a meaningful share in this market as they are providing general platforms that are important in order to drive enterprise adoption. Will there be more competition? Absolutely. As more chips are developed, as new infrastructure architecture is deployed, as people want to move from one cloud to another, they want choice in the marketplace. So I think that there's no doubt that the first wave of AI right now is putting in place the infrastructure. I think that 60 to 70% of the infrastructure that enterprises are going to tap into is going to come from hyperscalers. And so that's a real important market for them, which is why they are moving so quickly. And I do think over time there will be more choice, costs will come down, there will be more players, but that's one piece of the equation. I do think over time there will be continued innovation on the infrastructure side as we start to see more specialization, more unique capability that perhaps particular industries need in order to be successful. That's going to drive some differentiation. I think we're really going to start to see application categories start to get unlocked. And as we think about training and inference, those categories may require different kinds of solutions. And we're going to start to see a whole new set of players emerge there. And then that's not to say that, as we look at more vertical specific innovation that's going to happen, there's going to be a whole new value chain in some of these industries that are going to be created from scratch that the hyperscalers aren't even focused on today. And so
what would be an example? What would be an example of that?
Well, I think what I see in life sciences today and how pharma is leveraging AI to develop new drugs and therapies digitally in the cloud before they move that to the wet lab, and using AI to really expand the universe of the art of what's possible. And they are investing in reinventing their entire value chain and using concepts from AI and concepts of digital twins in order to reinvent the way that they innovate and do, drug discovery and drug development. And that's an example of a sector that is in the process of reinventing itself. We don't hear about all of the technologies they need to drive their sector forward. It's very different than the generalist technologies that the hyperscalers are building, but there's still incredible innovation that's happening that is very sector oriented. That's quite exciting and will drive meaningful returns for investors. So that's an example of, a sector specific innovation that's going to be happening at scale and is going to be quite meaningful. So I think as investors, we often have to think about what are the horizontal innovation areas that are ramping up, and how do we navigate the hyperscalers so that we find opportunities that have the moats and sustainability so that we can compete. And then how do we look for other markets, probably vertical markets, where the hyperscalers aren't going to be competing? And how do we create and build companies there that can capture all of the new value that this technology is going to be able to unlock and build incredible businesses? And that's going to be a whole other area of innovation that's going to be exciting. And so as an investor, I think you have to navigate between those two areas and see where the long-term potential will exist.
Yeah, I like that breakdown, because you're not just looking at, you're looking at a sequential set of things that need to happen, that are happening, and that will happen as this gets, as AI gets adopted. What are you most excited about right now? Sort of where, with some of the new AI capabilities that are being unlocked in that future forward mode, right? Where not incremental innovation, where you're replacing an existing workflow with some sort of AI or Gen AI infused. And I think that's very important, by the way. I think that's going to be quite compelling and game changing for enterprises. But net new stuff. So that was the other complaint, right? That we were saying, like, where is a fundamentally different type of application or approach or innovation that's changing the game, right? Do you see that? And where do you think that's happening today?
Well, I think for us, it's important to be, again, 5 years ahead of where the mainstream market is. I think right now the mainstream market is talking about and excited about LLMs and applications and how we're going to create new engagement models and workflows. And there are lots of great companies that are there. And I think there'll be lots of opportunities to change the way we engage customers. We do hyper-personalized marketing. We do software development and automate the code production process within companies. All that's great. And there's lots of opportunity there. Where we're equally as excited today is around what we're calling physical AI. So as we're starting to see AI being applied to biology, chemistry, physics, robotics, and how we're going to interact with AI, not just on our computer screens, but in the physical world, I think there's a whole new set of opportunities and applications and companies to be built in that whole world that is very, very exciting. And so a lot of what we're funding today are opportunities on that side, where we see physical AI becoming more of a reality. So whether that's AI for materials discovery or AI for drug discovery or AI in robotics and moving us closer to this whole world of, function specific robotics versus general purpose humanoid robotics and what does that mean to industries and the way that we are developing capabilities? Lots of really interesting companies and innovation that's happening there. And then as we apply LLMs to the whole world of physical AI, we start to then unlock a whole nother level of creativity and innovation there that no one's really talking about and paying attention to. So I think that we're keeping one eye focused on what's happening in general purpose enterprise applications and enterprise infrastructure and watching how companies are interacting with this technology. And we're keeping another eye focused on what's happening in this whole world of physical AI, which we feel is going to be the next great wave of excitement and energy as we start to really unlock science using the power of AI in some pretty profound and meaningful ways.
No, that I think, and we've already seen some evidence of that, right? Where robots being prompted by LLMs to figure out the physical world, and there've even been some interesting videos around that. I think even a year ago. So I think it's super cool. And I recently ran into one of your portfolio companies, Promise Robotics, which I think and they're doing something really, really interesting in that intersection as well. Coming back to the present world, we've talked about adoption being a challenge in the enterprise. Could you speak to what are the challenges? Like, what are the challenges that enterprises face? Right. I mean, you laid that out a bit a while ago around, just early in the conversation about all the different things that an enterprise needs to think about to integrate any new technology or a new piece of technology into their IT infrastructure and the broader business. How is that manifesting? How is that translating to your startups in the B2B space, and how are they dealing with it?
So number one, I think a lot of enterprises right now are in hyper experimentation mode, looking at generative AI and trying to figure out what the use cases are that they want to find within their organization. And I think what we're finding is that the early use cases are numerous, and there's lots of experimentation being done. And the ROI that they're able to unlock at a small scale is compelling. But as they then think about scaling this more broadly and deploying it more broadly across their organization, they're hitting some roadblocks that they have to navigate around. Number one, if they truly want to innovate using generative AI, how much should they be relying on third-party data versus first-party data that they may have internally? And is the data that they have internally, is it at the right quality level that they need? Does it have the right potential to drive innovation? And so there's data infrastructure needs that I think that they're trying to navigate around as they try and get prepared for this journey. The second is, do they have the compute resources and the ML talent that they need in order to more broadly deploy? And so that comes back to looking at, the last 10 years investments that all these companies have made in digital transformation and trying to understand, does it match what they need from a digital infrastructure as they think of what the next 10 years are going to provide? And so there's sort of legacy technology that they need to think about as they think about the infrastructure for deployment and what that means in order to do something at scale. That's another area that they're trying to navigate around. Third area is risk and compliance. So certainly in companies that are in more complex industries, it's all well and good to do a small pilot. But once you more broadly launch something into the market, how do you make sure there's a level of transparency? How do you make sure that there is a level of risk assessment? And how do you engage regulators if they're going to have questions about the solutions that you're deploying? And so there is a lot of questions around making sure that the risk and compliance organizations are comfortable with the solutions that are going to be launched. And then finally, the fourth area is around talent management and change management. We've got lots of people who are excited about AI, but a little bit nervous that their jobs are going to be taken up. And what does this mean for them? And I think that companies are trying to navigate very carefully, not to make sure that their employees feel that this is a tool to use to help them be more effective rather than as something that's going to replace them. And there is a whole change management exercise that's going to be needed in order to grow AI literacy get people comfortable with these tools, and then get them more broadly adopted. And so I think that anytime we see companies looking to scale their innovations within an enterprise, that often enterprises are having to deal with one or all of these different elements in order to think about truly scaling something more broadly. And that takes time and energy and work in order to do that well.
Wow, lots to unpack there. But something that's close to us, of course, is the risk and compliance aspect of these models. I think regulations are also coming out, which speak to that sort of that segment of issues that an enterprise needs to, or challenges that an enterprise needs to contend with when deploying AI. So, where do you see the role of regulation? And the early regulations has come out. What's your thinking around? Is it effective? Are we on the right track? Does it worry you in terms of where we're headed in terms of regulation?
Yeah, I sort of put regulation across a number of different vectors, right? I think there's a set of regulation that's specifically to AI as a category more broadly. And there, I think the questions are really around, building a regulatory framework that allows for responsible AI, right? Are we developing these solutions with the respect for data privacy, data security, a level of transparency, and making sure that the solution architecture makes sense and enterprises are comfortable with it and regulators are comfortable with it. And then there's another bucket of issues around ethical AI. So as we let these systems loose to make automated decisions, how do we understand a level of bias and have some transparency in terms of correcting that bias as we start to see these systems start to truly make automated decisions at scale? And so I think that's sort of one large bucket. Coupled in with all of that is making sure that there is a respect for, consumer privacy and trust, and dealing with the issues of misinformation and disinformation, and how companies are going to navigate that. And so all of that sort of falls into broad AI regulation. Then there's another vector of regulations that is more industry specific. So what is happening in financial services? What is happening in healthcare? How are those companies sort of dealing with the regulators around, their procurement process, their innovation process, the data that they're using internally that is sector specific? And I think there's going to be a whole set of discussions that are happening there around industry specifically and what they need to do to better understand what's happening in AI. I think regulation is important, and I think it will exist. I think that in these early days, it's very, very important for regulation to be flexible, because we're still very much in this early learning mode, which is really why we're a big proponent of developing regulatory sandboxes where companies can collaborate with innovators, share information and data, get more real-time feedback from regulators as they start to understand not only the intended consequences, but the unintended consequences of a lot of this technology. And certainly as the technology is still being invented, it would be a shame to spend all of this energy around one particular category, not to have that blown up completely and have a completely different approach, 6 months from now with a new technology area that exists. The field is moving so quickly that we need a level of flexible innovation. At the same time, I think we need the tools and platforms to start to think about how we're going to be able to operate in a regulated environment, because it will exist. And what do customers need? What do startups need? What do regulators need in order to provide a level of comfort so that we can operate within those parameters? And I think we need to start to think about what that world will look like. What we can't have happen is us being so strict and so worried that we squash innovation, lose the opportunity to reinvent these industries, perhaps to other jurisdictions that are a bit more flexible and more risk-taking in their approaches. And so I think we have to both be prudent, but at the same time, promote innovation and find a more collaborative approach to kind of navigating what we know and what we still don't know about these different categories to exist. And so I think it's all a work in progress still.
Yeah, good. I think we can go on for hours with you. This just peeling. I feel like we just peeled one layer here on some of these topics, and I have so many questions brewing. But in the interest of time, I think what I'd love to learn from you is, and others listening, what if someone's thinking of building something with AI today, and starting a company around AI, whether they're a researcher, whether they're a industry domain expert, or just an entrepreneur who now needs to build something with AI in mind. Where should they focus their energies? What are the opportunities that you think exist?
Well, I want entrepreneurs and researchers to think about a few things. Number one, as you think about AI and the opportunity to build products and solve problems, are you going to be focused on helping incumbents transform, or are you going to be looking to disrupt incumbents in particular sectors and markets? Both are going to be massive opportunities, but it's very important to understand as a company, do you coexist in the existing environment, or are you looking to disrupt a particular environment? And that has lots of implications around how you think about your product, how you think about competitive moats, how you think about collaboration in the market and your customers. And so I think that, with a market that is moving so quickly, it's really important to understand which mode you're in as you're thinking about business building. Number two, you really have to think about solving real problems that have meaningful ROI for companies. Companies have lots of priorities. How do you get yourself to be in that top 2, 3, 4 list of important priorities? And how can you bring about transformational opportunity and value leveraging AI in a meaningful way? And so I think that is important. We're seeing lots of companies that are excited about AI, but are nibbling at the corners, not necessarily always compelling ROI and use cases. And they're going to struggle with getting momentum and getting to scale. And so I do really think that founders need to be really thoughtful about value propositions and use cases and how they're going to create value faster, perhaps, than these organizations can do it themselves. And so that's important to think about. Third is this tension between horizontal applications or vertical specific applications. And I think each of them come with opportunities and threats. And I think as founders think about the kind of innovation that they're excited about, it's really important to understand the headwinds and tailwinds in each of those areas. We personally believe there's lots of white space in vertical specific applications that are flying under the radar, that lots of entrepreneurs are starting to get excited about. We think that that's exciting. The more horizontal applications, not a quarter goes by where we're not nervously, anxiously watching what Google and OpenAI and Microsoft and others are launching that could literally wipe out an entire category with one simple announcement. And so it's very important to be very careful and thoughtful about where you're going to, choose to build your company and how you navigate around that. And then finally, at the end of the day, as with building any technology company, it all comes down to talent. How do you find and attract and develop the absolute best talent in the world to win? And how do you keep abreast of what's happening in this field and innovate so that you can be 10 steps ahead of where everyone else is? Because we're still only in the first inning of this field. I guarantee you the things we're excited about today are going to be very different than the things that we're excited about 3 years from now. And so for founders and companies, it's very important to be plugged into where the field is moving, what are the new platforms and technologies that they need to be able to tap into, and how do you think about building value business models around that as this capability continues to grow and develop. And so those are the kinds of things that we encourage our founders to think about.
Awesome. I'm sure you want to talk to more entrepreneurs who have amazing ideas. Where should they reach you, Salim?
Absolutely. No, please feel free to reach out, Salim at radical.vc. Always looking to meet incredible people with ambitious ideas. And, we certainly feel like we're still only in the early stages of this opportunity. And yet this is where, this is the area that's going to change the world over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So we're incredibly fortunate to be a player in this field, and to be able to find and work with incredible founders who are ultimately, building the companies that are going to change the world. And so that's what's exciting for us.
That's amazing. As I said, I think this podcast could have gone on for a day. With just the amount of insight that you bring to the table. Thank you so much, Salim, for coming on. I would love to have you on for a part 2, maybe in a few weeks or a couple of months. I know you're a busy man with a very busy schedule. But yeah, looking forward. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you've been listening in, this is Salim Teja from Radical Ventures, sharing his insights in this world of AI and where they see the opportunities and the challenges and how to navigate them. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe or leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much again, Salim. See you next time.
Thank you.